guys, welcome to the office hours. We will start in just a few minutes here. And share my screen. Right. Can you guys hear me okay and see the screen okay? Need to put a comment in the chat or something like that. Can you hear me? Yep, thank you very much. I'm impressed. Double streaming, SpaceX and office hours. Yep. And of course, running an upgrade in a third window. That's how you do it on a fine Wednesday afternoon. These build numbers, they fly so, or versions fly by so fast these days. It's nice to see you coming up to 2107. Having a local recording going. I'm gonna start the stream in just a little bit here. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A window and I'll be happy to answer. All right, it is definitely time. I'm going to go ahead and start the stream. Give me just a second here. All right, officially welcome. It's Wednesday. It's the ViaMonstra office hours community edition. My name is Johan and I'll be your host for the next hour. If you have any questions, please use the Zoom Q&A feature for those of you that have joined the call. I also try to monitor the other feeds that we're streaming to, like LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. But I might be a little bit slow getting to those because I have them in a separate window here. Those questions coming in, the Zoom questions I have basically just in front of me, so that's a little bit easier for me to track. And I see some questions coming in already. That before diving into those, I just want to share real quick that indeed we have the Nordic Virtual Summit coming on this week, and I have a session there tomorrow morning. So if you want to learn about Windows 11 and network performance, tune in early, 7 a.m. Central Time, because this community conference goes in European time zones. Then, of course, we have our user group meeting tomorrow. Fine panel of speakers. Arya Carly, Mike Niehaus, Mike Danofsky, and Max Stein. We talk about basically everything that is new in Windows 11 with a touch of Intune added in as well to the mix. All right, so Jason had a question here regarding thoughts on fat Vim versus thin Vim, meaning basically having thin images without application versus having thicker images with applications. And to me, it comes down to, let me go over here. I love WordPad. It's a good tool. But in deployment projects, I fight quite hard, if I can, to have a thin image, meaning no application in the image. And the reason I do this is because that allows me to be very flexible at deployment time with this image. I can feed in different lists of applications, different configurations and whatnot, because the more things you cram into an image, the more static it becomes, the more frequent it has to be updated, and the less flexible you can become when you actually deploy it. And a bonus with having a thin image is that you can use it for all 4 deployment scenarios. You can use it for bare metal deployment, you can use it for refresh and replay scenarios, and you can use it for servicing. The minute you put in an application inside an image, you can no longer use that for servicing. The setup is just going to say, nope, I don't want to do this. You cannot use this for servicing. However, thick images, they are still in use. And the primary reason for this is usually deployment speed. Typically, education, they need to deploy lab over lunch or in the afternoon. And they have like hundreds of applications that needs to be available in that lab. And the only way for them to even remotely meet that deadline is to include them inside of the Vim file. So otherwise it will take, half an hour to get the thin image out, and then hours and hours of deployment time waiting for other applications to be deployed, applications like the entire Adobe Cloud Suite, the Autodesk Suite, 3D Studio Max, and all these really large applications that take time to deploy. Another reason I see quite a bit is what I refer to as application complexity, where you have like really complex applications set up, and that could be very well, that's a new acronym, engineering software that tons of plugins, different configurations and whatnot. It can also be developer stations. You have Visual Studio with 42 billion plugins that needs to be installed and configured, and it's just really, really hard to automate that process in a timely fashion. So usually it's one of these or both that I see are valid reasons for having a thick image. And it's all about the SLA for the organizations that you work with. Is it okay if it takes 5 hours to deploy a machine? Even for testing? Well, if that's the case, you can certainly have a thin image and simply have the sequence installing the applications afterwards, or as soon as it comes up in Windows, you have the sequence installing the apps. If it's not okay, well, then you need to have an image and add some apps to it to basically cut down on speed. Something to note here that if you had a benchmarking number from a few years back, run it again, because modern hardware, networking, SSD drives, better CPUs, they can actually shut down deployment time quite a bit. All right. So I hope I answered that one. Let's see. There was a follow-up comment to it. No, that was just the same question there. The trick to creating these ones, I typically use sequences to do this. But these days, especially for Windows 11, is that if you do a build and capture of a sequence, if that machine is allowed to have internet access, even for just a little bit, it's going to go ahead and start install updates, not just regular security updates, but updates to the universal apps in Windows. And with Windows 11, that also includes OneDrive. So either you have to block that on a firewall level, or in my case, when I do a build and capture, I simply turn off internet access now. And that makes sure that none of these gets updated, and I can happily run through a build and capture process. No matter what you do in these scenarios, I recommend, if you are building thicker images, use a concept of an image factory, which is basically automated build and capture, so that you always can reproduce and recreate that image many, many times over. And you're going to know it's going to be equally good both of those times. All right. Gonna check the Twitter stream real quick just to see that we have it going correctly. It's always fun trying to do like 4 billion things at the same time. Yeah, it's up and running. At least I can see it on my phone, so I take that as a good sign. All right, any other questions? Love questions. All right, I actually got a question through email earlier. It was a follow-up to a question we had last week when I talked about one of the export scripts that I had created to basically export the Vim index out of an ISO file. And Matt had a problem that that script simply would not work in the environment. And after playing around with it for a while, I actually realized why. Because Matt was using an ISO file from the evaluation center. And let me just show you one of those. So this is one of those that you download from Microsoft Evaluation Center. It's a Windows Server 2019 standard ISO image. And the script that I was using looked like this. Now, the challenge is that in evaluation media, it's actually named differently. So what I did, I simply mounted that ISO, and I used the get Windows image command. And then I was able to see that, okay, the image name is actually having the keyword evaluation in it. And sure enough, as soon as I added that in instead of this one, I will be happy to, it exported just fine. So that was a little unknown gotcha there that I haven't paid attention to when I wrote the script. So I actually added in a little notification or note in the script that, all right, the eval media is named differently. All right. Any other questions? Can be MDT, can be OSD, can be Windows 10, 11 server, ConfigMgr, you name it. I'll be happy to give it a go. Have a sip of coffee. Looks like we have any questions in the various channels at least. I was checking up that just now. Notification from YouTube here, see what that is. Using my phone as a third screen, that's kind of an interesting part. Yeah, I love this. You won't believe this. The notification I got was a notification from YouTube that the person named Johan Arvidmark is running a live stream at the moment. Yeah, thank you, YouTube. I'm aware. I'm the one streaming, so good there. Thank you. All right. Kevin, I have a question. Any idea how to prevent Teams from installing on Windows 11 Enterprise? Doesn't seem to be in the install media and can't be removed like a normal provisioning app. I actually don't know how that is being installed in Windows 11. I haven't looked into that, so I wouldn't know even where to start investigating that. But I guess a good tool could be to run Procmon just to see what's going on the machine. I would expect it to be a universal app that would come in, but if it's not in that list, it's obviously something else. If it's a store update or a store app, you can try to disable the usual updates for store for business policies if you have enterprise or education, or try to disable the other policies related to additional apps in Windows. But other than that, I unfortunately don't know about that one. I'll mark it down as a question. I can do some research until our next office hours, but Teams in 11 or how to prevent it, I don't know. And I'm going old school. I'm actually writing it down on a piece of paper here, just because I happen to have it in front of me. Easy enough. All right. Any other questions? Or if someone happened to know the answer already, feel free to put that in the chat. Might be someone who has actually figured it out earlier. All right, let's see. A note on build and capture. We rarely use build and capture any longer, and that's exactly what I see as well. In general, in the IT industry right now, the trend is to move away from thicker images to thinner images. But this comment was also they keep one around for huge, large applications like CAD applications. But yeah, the trend is going to thinner images, with the exception where you actually still might have one for speed in this case. One organization I worked with, they decided to keep around 2 images, one thin and one thick. And the thick one, they only deployed to a certain department, and then everybody else got the thin one. So that's also an option. So there was a question from Nathan coming in. Have you noticed any lags in Azure AD updating the membership on dynamic groups? Yes, I have. And there is absolutely nothing you can do about it, unfortunately. Dynamic groups, especially for devices, can take a long time. And it seems like the bigger the tenant, the bigger the problem. But I have even in my small test and demo tenants, see dynamic groups takes a really long time. And that's simply how they work. And I mean, there is a reason why they recently added in, even though it's in preview, the device filters and whatnot to be able to do filtering more quickly for certain type of assignments or deployments, as I call them, even though the correct term is assignment. So unfortunately, it's a known issue in Intune that dynamic group can take a long time. And I prefer to use scripting approaches to solve that problem, where I basically scripting machines into groups statically and making sure they're there before I allow a deployment to start. Let's see, I have some questions coming in from Facebook here. What's the best way to configure the image during deployment to remove all the built-in apps such as Xbox and games? So there are 2 different types of stuff that comes in a Windows 10 and Windows 11 image. The first one that are actually in the box, and those you can remove even before you deploy the image by simply yanking out of the bin file. Or you can have a PowerShell script that run during a build and capture that goes ahead and removes them. Then you have the ones that actually are coming down from internet once the machine is alive and kicking, and those can be blocked by policies, even though, as I mentioned before, lately, that doesn't seem to take full effect on Windows 11 at the moment. So for those, I just block internet access. In terms of script, one of the better ones is from Nikolai. He has been keeping it fairly updated for different versions of Windows. So here is one version for 20H2. But what I like about this script, it basically works with an allow list where you define not what you want to delete, but what you would like to keep, and then it deletes everything else. So if you haven't seen this script, I'll be happy to put the link up in the chat for you. Give me just a moment there. I'm putting it in the chat link that I have here in the meeting, because that one will be uploaded to our Academy portal. And I wonder if I can actually reply to that one. I can send the link on that Facebook channel a little bit later. I need to open it up. I just see the incoming questions. I don't have a reply option at the moment. All right. Should we include Flash? No Flash anymore, long gone. And even if you actually have an older image that has it will be gone the next time it's time to updating that machine. So Flash should no longer exist in any form or shape or capacity. Johnny had a good question or comment. I have no questions. You have taught me everything already. Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. Dan is asking, that's also on Facebook. If doing hybrid Azure domain join in environment with multiple on-premises domains, is there a way to prompt in autopilot for which domain the machine should be joined to? It might be possible through some sort of elegant script that connects to Microsoft Graph and try to do something clever, but I have seen nothing like that. And it's certainly nothing that is built into the Windows setup that I stumbled across either. So unfortunately, that will have to be some very, very customized solution. What I do know is that through web services like REST-PS, you can interrupt the join process and actually do things at that point, even on the server side, but you have to relay that job to a secure server that actually does that, or to an Azure, basically a function, an Azure function, a PowerShell script that has the right permissions to play around and do some changes there. Might be doable, untested by me. Sorry, I don't have any better info on that one. All right. Let's see. Jason is asking, what workloads are people starting to shift into Intune? The most common one is actually Windows updates. Even though ConfigMgr obviously has 4,000 different knobs and wheels and things, buttons you can press to get a very, very good and detailed deal for Windows Update. I see, for example, education are doing a push on removing that complexity and replace it to do updates in Intune. Conditional access, of course, there's no question. You only have Intune and Azure AD to do that in a good way. But after that, we're talking about scripts, applications, and device configurations. Those are like together with the Windows Update, those are the top 4 one, and I'm also throwing in endpoint security into that mix as part of the device configuration. So, I mean, you have, I can show you the current list of workloads. I have it configured here, one of my tenants. Cloud, here. It's coming, it just needs to think about it. Right. So here we have the current workloads. So this one is common here. Some extension this one, but definitely this one here. Very common. In my lab environment, I don't do all my devices. I have worked with piloting groups. I have certain part of my labs that are co-managed and some parts that are, I keep the workload on ConfigMgr. Awesome questions. Thank you, guys. Yeah, the upcoming deployment service looks interesting. I'm of the firm belief that I believe it's working when I see it. I know that testing of driver setup and BIOS and firmware updates through new services, it usually takes a little while until most of the bugs are ironed out. But yes, indeed. In fact, I will bring up that link for you so you have it as well. It was announced earlier this year, and they sort of re-announced it now at Ignite. That was just in the beginning of November this month. But this is a good one to learn up about. There are some videos here and some updates now from Ignite on this one also. So in 2022, we'll start to see this coming in a more broader scale. And I highly recommend you to look into this and evaluate this one. Because currently in Intune, the only way you can do driver update is like an on switch. There is no control whatsoever on where and how and when. But this deployment service will give you that granularity. So I'll put that link in the chat for you guys. Thank you, Jason, for sharing that one. Let's see here. Beautiful. All right. Any other questions? I have a whopping 35 minutes available. Any questions at all? I'll be happy to try to answer them. Other channels. Looking good so far. One question coming up. All right, let's see what that one is. It was Shad that was hinted that there was an upcoming question. Give him a minute or two to type it down. I'm typing was the follow-up comment. Yep. I'm not going anywhere, so keep on typing. And if anyone else have any questions, by all means, put them in there and we'll just add them to the queue. There is a question coming in from YouTube in the meantime. Is it safe to enable data deduplication on a deployment share? In general, yes. What I have seen is a little bit of interesting scenarios when you're using DFSR to replicate them. And I've also seen that when you're doing updates of them, that can cause some interesting effects. The workaround is fairly easy though. If you have an MDT server, like this one here, where I have a few different deployment shares. If I want to enable data deduplication and I also want to replicate this one out to multiple other sites and servers, what I recommend is actually spin up a link deployment share and use that one for the replication part. And then there seem to be little to no issues with data deduplication. Just make sure that if you do that, if you go into your server manager and come on. If I will go ahead and add in a dedupe on this server, I have done it already, so I have that role installed here. If you're sharing that volume with others, let me go here. With other stuff, basically, start to exclude things. Exclude folders that are not supposed to be duplicated. For example, if your deployment service hosting SQL, well, exclude SQL from it. So dedupe is more for static content that doesn't change around too much, but you can cut down the storage used on a server by quite a bit. And this also goes for ConfigMgr, even though there are a little bit more restrictions on what you can enable data deduplication on for ConfigMgr. But I hope that answered the question for MDT there. Let's see. Question on autopilot, hybrid Azure AD. IT support does pre-provisioning and seals the computer. On boot, the user logs in with their ADDS account and the deployment continues. However, during ESP, the user is prompted to authenticate with Azure AD creds and then prompted to allow the company organization to manage the device. That can be quite many things. And those scenarios are quite tricky to troubleshoot as well. I think I would have to have a little bit more information about that setup to be able to give any ideas on that. In general, all types of hybrid Azure AD join scenarios are complicated to work with. It all comes down to having multiple connectors, synchronizations going both ways. You're having offline objects being created, have to be downloaded to the client. The client needs to get an application VPN app installed and downloaded, and they need to have line of sight to the domain controller so they actually can complete the final onboarding process. I would recommend drop me an email on that one, and I'll see if I can provide some other information. But those are tricky, unfortunately. I know customers spending months on figuring stuff out like that, so it's not something that take like 2 minutes and done. If you have the chance of skipping it, skip it. A simple Azure AD join is much easier to deal with than a hybrid join. All right. Question from Johnny regarding Silverlight. How to prevent that from showing up? It's no longer required. It's definitely not longer required for ConfigMgr, and I see very little line of business applications out there these days that will require Silverlight. I would definitely recommend removing it from machines where you don't need it. I don't see a point for having Silverlight around anymore. There was a follow-up comment in the chat here. Yep, it was used in the older app catalog side for ConfigMgr, but that one is now long gone and replaced with the same functionality in Software Center. So soon as you get rid of that role, which you should have done already, also go ahead and remove Silverlight. no need. Dan is asking, you have any advice for removing 1E products from a ConfigMgr environment? That depends on what type of products those are. If you're talking about solutions like the one in Nomad platform or their Pix integration that comes with it, they are usually there for a reason, to get peer-to-peer, to get better Pixie than it's in ConfigMgr by default, and you usually have to replace them with something else. So I've seen organizations certainly replacing third-party peer-to-peer solutions with native Microsoft solutions because they are starting to get pretty dang good these days. Have you asked me 10 years ago, I will say, well, there is no really good built-in option, or maybe not 10, but 15 then. Before branch cache, for example, Microsoft didn't have any good peer-to-peer platform, and it took Microsoft forever, or not forever, it took them a long time to implement peer cache support and to make available Pixie clients that can run on a client operating system. Whereas third-party vendors, even open source vendors like iPix, etc., they've had that for a long time. So yeah, can certainly help if I've done a few of those projects. So if you do need help with that, reach out. I'll happy to help on that one. Yeah. All right. That was a good link posted from Russell as part of the Teams question we had earlier. Let me bring that one up. We'll put this one in. So it's the Sysmensweb.com blog. It's a multi-blog universe, so to speak, but this one seems kind of promising to the question we had earlier. So I will put that in the chat for you guys. But who it was that asked, but I'm putting the link out there. Here we go. Thank you for that, Russell. Kevin is asking, I know building capture is less common these days, but can we expect to see an update to my blog post? Absolutely, yes. It's quite easy. Basically take my last Windows 10 post, this one here, and replace it with Windows 11. And you can more or less follow the same step-by-step ideas that is in this blog post. The only thing I like to recommend is what I mentioned earlier, disable internet access on this VM. Otherwise, sysprep is going to break with this very not so happy error message when you try to do build and capture. I've been successful doing BIOS-based builds on Windows 11 as long as the hotfix for UEFI detection is in place. Saw some report on that failing in VMware workstations, but I haven't had a chance to verify that myself. But I certainly have done builds on Hyper-V machines with Generation 1 VMs, BIOS-based. The trick to that hotfix in general is to obviously extract it, but not just copying that to the MDT installation folder as the documentation suggests, but also put it in each and every deployment share that you might have. And if you have added that to a media or any type of point, update the media as well, so you don't have older versions of it around. So that usually takes care of that problem. If you have seen any other weird behavior, by all means, reach out to more details, and I'll be happy to answer. The reason for using NVMs or BIOS-based VMs has simply been to have a simpler image, but there is nothing that prevents you from doing build and capture of a UEFI-based disk layout or partitioning layout, because when it's time to do the capture, it's only going to capture the volume that contains Windows, so to speak. DISM that is being used to capture in MDT when you do build and captures, it's not like the old Ghost or TrueImage, any of those solutions that actually capture the disk layout. A WIM, when captured, it's more like a zip file. It cares about files. It doesn't care about the structure on the disk or anything like that. So you should be good on that one too. All right. Any other questions? We have 22 minutes left. Yeah. That was a good comment. Screen sharing is no longer visible. I can fix that right away with my magic press of a screen deck button. So I think you'll have to go back, and thank you for that note. Appreciate it. This was the post I showed what the error would look like when sysprep is not behaving due to installation of applications. This was the one I showed regarding building a reference image. Just replace this one with Windows 11, and you will have a step-by-step post on it. I guess I'll have to put on my to-do list to actually create a real post for Windows 11. It's been on my to-do list anyway, so I'd have to bump that one up. The other thing I mentioned was the Teams link. I'm not sure if I shared the screen when I posted that one. If I didn't, I will bring it up again here. So this one here, this was the one that I posted in the chat. All right, thank you for that. Julian is asking, can we post any of the links on the Facebook stream? Yeah, I can go ahead and do that as soon as we're done with the call. Should be able to do that quickly. All right. I have an anonymous attendee asking, has anyone on Office 2016 Pro Plus found a way to remove Skype for Business without removing the whole suite? Nothing I've tested myself, but it appears like some of the scrubbing scripts would be able to do that. Nothing that rings a bell, I'm afraid. Search on that scrubbing script that was popular. Anyone on the chat happen to know? Feel free to chime in on that one. There seems to be something in maybe this one. Some Spiceworks community, someone had an idea of creating an MSP file that just removed that one. I have not tested this one, so I'm not sure if it's working, but it seemed promising enough. I think. But this is more like actually installing it without it, not removing it. Nah, scrap that one. That's not gonna help if you already have it installed. The chat posted a link. The scrubbing scripts at least. I'll put that in the link for you, or in the chat for you. Possibly there might be something in there that can help you get rid of just Skype. All right. Fabian on Facebook commented in, you need to create a configuration XML file to remove Skype. All right, thank you for that information. So it seems like there is a way after all, and Fabian also posted a link to it. Thank you very much. This is definitely community at its finest. Good teamwork. Maybe this one. I'll put this link in the chat as well as a resource for you. And I appreciate the help there. And is mentioning that pdq.com has an article on removing Skype. If I can find that post real quick. Well, we find how to deploy it, not actually removing it. That could be my searching skills failing me also. If you have a short link to that post, I'll be grateful for it, but yeah. All right. Any other questions? Nothing new on Facebook and YouTube. See if there's anything on LinkedIn. Yet that I can see in terms of comments. All right, any other questions? Anything at all? What's a question regarding, have you ever seen a ConfigMgr state migration point where requesting a state store fails with crypto key failed? I have not. I did see some reports about issues with load state and scan state from ADK 11, but I haven't had a chance to troubleshoot that myself yet. But I have not seen that one. The particular error was this one here. I can bring that up on the screen. This was an SMP issue, state migration point issue, but nothing that rings a bell. A quick workaround, of course, is simply to temporarily disable the SMB or SMP and just change the OSD state store path value to a file share. They won't be encrypted each backup, but at least it will get something going so you can continue to do refresh and replay scenarios where you are storing the state migration data up on the file share. Right. If anyone happened to have seen this and solved it, by all means, please reach out and I'll relay the answer. Ty is asking if I have Discord. I certainly have an account on the admin channel there, but I have not been active in quite some time on that one. So you'll find my username somewhere in there. I have a quite unique last name, so I'm easy to find that way. All right. Any other question? Or do we in admin channel? Some updates this morning from just newly discovered SQL things in ConfigMgr. I figured I could share because I tweeted it literally like this afternoon. Yeah, this one here. Let me bring it up. Stefan Roll, who gave us some heads up regarding if you have CU26 installed or SQL 2016 Service Pack 3 installed, please be aware there are an issue with that one. The workaround is fairly simple. Either apply a hotfix to this one, Service Pack 3, or get CU27 where the fix is solved, or simply uninstall whatever CU that you installed lately, like this one here. So I will put that in the chat for you as well. CU26 in SP3. That's a good one. Else happened recently? Oh yeah, might know that there was a CU for Windows being released this week as part of Patch Tuesday, and once again there seems to be an issue with printers in it. So thank you, Suno, for that heads up. He didn't seem too happy about it, but that's it. So put that one in the chat too, a little bit of longer description, but that will work. And this one is backed up with some more information on the QB article on it. The article, when I read it, it basically says it's no such a big deal for consumer devices, but it seemed to be a big deal for enterprise managed devices. So print nightmare kind of continues to live on, it seems. Yep. All right. Oh, what's going on? I believe that was pretty much it. David Segura released a new version of OSD SUS to support the monthly updates from November. There was a new PowerShell script for PC redist installations released. And there was a friendly reminding from Joe Lurie that Windows 10 2004 expires next month. So if you have machines out there, make sure to install the enablement package to it. There was a comment or question regarding uninstalling software by display name, and basically referencing a solution from Jason Sandys back in the days. This one here. And if I have seen a PowerShell version of this one, I have not, but that shouldn't be too hard to figure out unless there is one already. Because you only need to figure out the IDE for the MSI installer and feed it in. And if anyone have seen a PowerShell script version of this, by all means, please post that in the chat. Nathan mentioned in the chat here that the PowerShell app deploy toolkit could be an option for that. I haven't tried that for uninstalls, but that might be absolutely true. This, by the way, is not that one. I was trying to do copy and paste, failed miserably. This one here is just a downright amazing platform for installations, and their organization actually using this as a standard way of deploying stuff. Jason is also chiming in saying that, yeah, PS app deploy for the win. I use it to clean up all the time for uninstalls. So maybe look into that one. I'll put the link up in the chat so you have it. Thank you for that comment. Alpha is asking, can you quickly show the error message from the UseMD question? Absolutely. It was this one here, and it was for the state migration point when doing refresh and replay scenarios and using that as your state store or storage for the UseMD backups. I can put it in the chat window if you want to do a copy and paste. Here we go. Any other questions? I have 5 more minutes. Scott is asking, I'm wondering if there's a standalone version of CM Pivot. In a way, yes. Microsoft did release, I forgot what version of ConfigMgr, but in the installation directory here, tools, CM Pivot, there is a separate MSI you can install to just get the tool. So you don't have to start it from within the ConfigMgr console. We can just install this one. So hopefully that can solve that question. Basically, if I take this one and go to one of my clients that does not have a ConfigMgr console, this one does not have. Let's see what happens here. It seems like I can run it. Not sure how to actually, okay, here I can select collections. So I pick a collection where I have some machines. This one here will do, I think. Most of those are actually offline at the moment, but I can try to run a query just to see what happens here. Free disk space in gigs. Could have some of these online at least. Get some data back shortly. Yeah. So this worked quite well, I'll say. So once again, I did not have the ConfigMgr console installed on this one. I just copied over the MSI and installed it. And this is on one of my Windows 10 clients that I did that. So this is just the Windows 10 21H1. I just grabbed the binary from the server here in tools. Oh, just grab the MSI from there. There are some other client tools here that are useful, like the support center tools, also for clients, useful for troubleshooting. It just ships with ConfigMgr. Of course, you can just create an app and deploy it out there so you have it available. That works. All right. Any other questions? One more minute. Any insight on getting communication with an MDT database to work with TLS 1.2 in WinPE? I have a workaround. It's not elegant, but it is a workaround. And that is changing how you communicate with it. So I actually wrote a post for this here, where I'm switching to using a web service server side, and then have that script running on the SQL server itself. So that way I'm no longer bound to restrictions of the WinPE client and the MDAC connector in WinPE or MDAC component. I basically need nothing but 443 open up on my MDT server. So if you haven't seen this one, that could be a way to work around security. And by nature, this is much more secure because the WinPE client is just asking, in this case, a service that I'm running on my deployment server. So I have a REST service running here. And that service in turn is running a PowerShell script that takes care of the request and connects to the MDT database locally. So maybe that. All right, we are up on the hour. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you for all the good questions. I'll get the links posted for the channels that I didn't have a chance to do a live update on, and hope to see you guys next week. Thank you so much.